When did you realize someone was insane during a conversation? And how did you get yourself out of it? Story 1. I thought it sounded off when she told me she once did an at-home abortion with a butter knife at 12 years old. But it turns out that was the least disturbing part of the conversation, which included her being abused by her parents, then later proclaiming them very loving and supportive. Graphic descriptions of how she cut her wrists, the right way even, in front of her ex, who supposedly abused her mentally to show her how much pain she was in, followed by a 1-month forced stay in a psychiatric facility. After researching, that was a total lie. It takes time, money, and court orders to forcefully commit someone. Her self-diagnosed BPD and a plethora of other stuff. It was the first time that we met. I just ghosted her. I'm really sorry if all of that happened to her, but at one point I seriously couldn't decide whether or not she was lying to me. And at one point it was blatantly obvious that she was completely delusional. She tried hitting on me later, and I swear to gosh, it was the scariest thing ever, because I was just waiting for her to whip out a knife and start cutting again. She seems to be doing good now. I rarely see her, but she has her own name brand website where she shares her life and thoughts, and I sometimes creep. Still sounds a little crazy if you ask me. I'm sorry. An at-home abortion with a butter knife. I mean, even if the chick's crazy or not, I've never heard anything like this before in my life. Also, why would anyone lie about that? Do you know what I mean? That's a deep, dark, dirty, gross lie. I think you have to be crazy to even lie about that. Do you know what I mean? How did you think that up? How did you think that scenario up in your brain? Your brain cannot be a normal, rationally thinking brain if you're creating lies as detailed and as dark as that. Do you know what I mean, gang? That is rough. I've got some serious, disturbing imagery going on right now that I did not ask for. So thank you. Story 2. I once had a next door neighbour who seemed a bit weird, but friendly, so it was cool. One night, I'm coming home from work, right, and encounter her standing outside of the apartment building, expectantly, smoking a cigarette. I walk up and say hi, and she says hi back, and then launches into this ridiculous story about how Jack Black is her soulmate, and how a red 4-door vehicle is about to pull up any minute now to pick her up for a road trip. She doesn't have anything with her. It was obviously ridiculous, but she didn't seem dangerous, and I wanted to see what happened when the car never showed up. So I bum a smoke and hang out with her while she just waxes weirder and weirder, going on about how some actress stole her soul and more crazy stuff like that. I wasn't creeped out by it so much as exceptionally entertained by her storytelling. So I stand out there for 15 minutes or so until I start to get bored and try to say goodbye, but she's like, "No, they'll be here any second." Not 5 seconds later, and a red 4-door car pulls up and parks less than a car length ahead of where we're standing, and I have this insane moment where I think maybe she was telling the truth. Looking relieved that they've finally arrived, she promptly opens the back seat and gets into the car and shuts the door behind her. The car starts. I'm in absolute shock. They then kick her out and nope the hell out of there, and I follow suit as I watch her chasing the car into the night. I'll never forget how shocked I was that car actually pulled up. Story 3. I had to go into work on my day off to terminate someone. I'd fired people before in the past, no big deal. Just like with all the others, this person had gotten themselves fired. Never really had any crazy issues with them before. So I go in about half an hour before our location opens, and the plan is to terminate the person quickly, then work their scheduled shift. In hindsight, I should not have been alone with them. I inform them why they're being terminated. They sign the necessary forms and head for the door. Then the crazy starts. First, there was the fists of maniacal laughter, interspersed with shouts of rage. They were pacing back and forth, occasionally grabbing things I feared would be thrown at me. Outwardly, I maintained my calm, managerial composure. I calmly repeated they needed to leave the premises before I called the authorities. They went to begging for their job, then laughing about how stupid they were, then raging at the supposed lies that were told about them. Cameras showed they weren't lies, then giggling sadly. I reiterated they needed to leave. After a half hour of coercing and having a phone in hand to dial 911, they left. I immediately called my supervisor and informed them. I was nervous the whole day that they'd come back in and do something. Okay, yeah, I can't lie, that is pretty booky, isn't it? I think that's one thing I would absolutely not do if I was a manager. Well, I kind of would have to. But firing someone, I just have not got the heart, guys. I really do not. I wouldn't just think, okay, I can fire this person. I'd think about their life and them not having any money and their family, their children, their pets, not having food. I genuinely just could not do it. I'm not the kind of person that can sort of take things face on. I have to, I literally look deep into people's souls and lives. Like, I see so much more than just a person in front of me. Do you know what I mean? Which is a really good thing at times, but it also can be kind of difficult when let's say I'm in an argument with someone, right? And they've done me wrong, but I can't help but feel sorry for them if I'm then giving them grief. I don't know what's the explanation for, well, what's the word or the term for someone that's like that? Is it naive? Is it, I don't know what the word is. Cheese? Help me out here, brother. Story 4. It was a kid I was babysitting. I thought it was pretty weird to be babysitting a 16-year-old at 18, but after a while we became friends and he started to open up to me. For gosh knows what reason, he decided to tell me he molested a 9-year-old. I then realised I was there because his mum didn't want him alone with his 11-year-old sister. To give some context, afterward I had no idea what to say, other than ask why he told me. He said he didn't know, but it seemed like he was asking for forgiveness. It got to the point where he was straight up threatening to kill himself if I rejected him as a friend, and unfortunately I was easily very guilt-tripped. So, he went to bed and I watched TV till it was time to go home because I didn't want to leave his sister. When the mum came home, I told her exactly what he told me, but she already knew because he told his favourite teacher at school, and of course, she reported it. I've just never picked up the phone calls or text messages. I will say though, while he was asleep, the thought of smothering him did cross my mind. Story 5. When I was a cashier at Borders, I had long hair and was starting to grow a beard, so I looked a little bit like Jesus according to some. One day I had this lady as a customer. Seemed a bit kooky by the way she dressed and acted, but overall was polite. She commented about how I looked like Jesus, and then asked me if she could tell me something. I didn't want to be rude, so I said okay, and just ended up on this rant about her life and what Jesus meant to her. There were other customers, so I kind of cut her off and said sorry, but there were other people in line. This didn't faze her though. She just stood off a bit to the side and continued on her rant. It was incredibly awkward having to ring up these other people while she stood there quoting the Bible. This went on for about 20 minutes before my manager finally came back and she got security to escort her out. She seemed pretty harmless, but I was still a little bit freaked out that she would be waiting outside for me after my shift was done to stab me or follow me home or something. Story 6. I was at a family wedding and there was this guy I didn't know that was amazing on the dance floor. He had decent moves, but it was more that he was so dedicated to his dancing, so charismatic, that he really drew the eye. Anyway, my father-in-law got talking to him and eventually drew me into the conversation. Dancer guy had been telling my father-in-law in great detail about a recent manic episode during which he'd emptied his bank account, shared with his wife, and bought a boat and sailed it from the US to Denmark, and then stayed there in a drunken stupor for weeks before it finally occurred to him that he needed to tell his wife where he was, and also that they couldn't afford a boat. Partway through the conversation, it became obvious that he was currently in another manic state, but he was very engaging, so we didn't try to extricate ourselves from the conversation. Eventually, his wife dragged him away. We felt bad for her. Well, I mean, I can't lie. It sounds quite fun, right? It sounds like quite a fun and adventurous life if you were to be with this guy. I don't know if would you say that's insane? I don't actually know. That just kind of sounds like someone that's not entirely sure what they want from life, but I'm not going to get deep like I always do. I just think I wouldn't call that crazy, in all honesty. And being a good dancer and going mental on the dance floor, that's cool. You ain't mental for that, okay? Let me tell you. Because if you're mental for that, then I need to be sectioned. I'm just putting it out there. Because I would 110% do that, okay? And so we all should. If you hear music, dance, people, like you got no pants on. Story 7. I have a co-worker who's a real chatterbox. It starts innocuously enough. What she had for dinner, how her husband is doing after his car wreck, what happened at church this past Sunday. She'll ramble on and on and on about this for so long as you'll stand there, only barely giving you a chance to say you've got to do something else and politely end the conversation. The best way at work we found to get away from her is to signal someone over and turn her attention onto the new victim. The funny thing is that no one, not even me, has caught onto this and will always happily trot over to see what the conversation's about, only to get caught in the death chatter. However, if she ever starts talking about the news, run for your sanity. I don't know what news channel she watches, but every day it seems she finds a new story about someone somewhere raping and murdering an infant. And it's not something she mentions once and moves away from. She dwells on such things, rambling on about them for as much as half an hour if you stand there and let her mouth run. I'm starting to think she has a fetish. Story 8. I was in the smokers section of a club a couple of years ago. So I'm sitting there, right, enjoying my drink and filthy cancer stick, when this guy in full denim asked me to sit and talk. Now, I was pinging pretty hard, so I was like, yeah, sure, that sounds like a great idea. So we're sitting down, and this guy straight up says, after we shake hands, we'll be connected for life. So I laugh it off, shake his hand, and see where the conversation goes. This guy starts playing the worst game of 20 guesses ever. Him, you're 22. Nope. Him, 21. Me, nah, bro. Him, 27? Nah, I'm this age. I knew that. We are connected. All right, man. So I feel like this guy's dropped acid and is tripping, but then he gets real weird and dark. Him, I sense you have the beast in you. I do as well. What the hell's the beast? This is where I freaked out. The beast is something in a lot of us. It's everything that's hate, and you can only control it by giving it what it wants. What does it want? Well, I'm a vegan, but the beast demands meat. Without it, he screams at my soul. Me. Okay, man. I'm gonna bow. No, I'm vegan. I could never hurt an animal. But the beast needs what it needs. I do the right thing and only eat chicken because chickens deserve to die. Why do chickens deserve to die? Because all the rapists, pedophiles, and murderers get reincarnated as chickens. How do you know this? They told me. So I'm irked here and decide to try and bell while changing the conversation a little. Me. So how's being vegan? I'm vegan 99% of the time, but the beast needs to eat. I feed him chicken nuggets 1% of the time. So every night I go to McDonald's and buy 20 nuggets. You should let your beast free sometimes too, or else you'll become all beast and come back as a chicken. I just walked off at this point. It all sounds ridiculous, but this dude was super dark and sinister. I went back in after a while, and the guy was sitting in the same spot with 4 people sitting around him listening to his word like it was gospel. I feel like I witnessed the start of a cult. Okay, I think you've met a classic acid head there. I mean, to be honest, it's either that or he's like got a joke with his friends that he's going to walk around and sort of like creep everyone out for the evening or something. But it's either definitely too much acid or too much, well, probably all of this, or alcohol, or it's an ongoing joke with friends, because that just cannot be real, can it? Like, and if you can quite clearly see that he's on something as well, yeah, it's just, this guy isn't insane. He's either drug-induced insane or he's pulling your leg, which in England means having a joke with you. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Story 9. I met my friend's super Christian girlfriend for the first time. Out of the blue, she starts asking me questions like if I'm a virgin, who I've dated before I started dating my significant other, and why I didn't have a crush on her boyfriend. He liked me in high school. Who her boyfriend liked in high school, and who her boyfriend liked in middle school. It got even weirder after that. My friend and I used to game all the time. After meeting his girlfriend, she told me we can no longer game together. We can't Skype together. We were in different states at the time. We can no longer speak on the phone together. We can't be alone together. We can't even text. She claims that he's a good Christian guy and he needs good Christian guy friends. Since I'm a girl, she told me that Christian guys shouldn't have friends of the opposite gender. Unfortunately, my friend's blindsided by his girlfriend, and he chose her over all his female friends. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of this video, and have a wonderful day. Story 10. I was on my first cruise, a 3-day trip to the Bahamas, and back to Florida. I was talking to a dude at the bar, and asked where he's from. Jupiter, is his response. Luckily, my buddy came round and I just walked away. Found out years later that Jupiter, FL, is a real place, and remembered this guy from the cruise that I thought was nuts. Story 11. So I went into a McDonald's, and this woman recognised me from some of the college classes we had together. I think. Well, at any rate, she seemed pretty certain, and she seemed like she might be familiar. 2 eyes, a nose, some hair. I might have seen her before. She started telling me that her friend was psychic, could feel people's energy, and could read her mind. Now that's not the weirdest thing I've ever heard, and I'd probably have been okay with that. Then she started telling me about the radio DJ out of the next town, who was watching her in the house with video cameras hidden in her shower. She knew he was watching her because during his broadcast he would play certain sound effects and tell jokes about her every time she farted. I told her I had to get going. I was just there for a carry-out and there were some people waiting in the car. Okay guys, this one made me giggle, I can't lie. He played certain sound effects whenever she farted. Hun, okay, I mean I'm no therapist, I'm no psychologist, or psychiatrist, whatever it is that, whatever those heroes' names are that look after people that are mentally ill. I'm not one of them, but I can tell you I think you are paranoid AF, okay? To think that someone is playing songs or noises or sound effects whenever you're farting, it really is paranoia. It just is. Story 12. I knew a boy from my old school who was the stereotypical loner and weird kid. He often talked about hunting animals on his parents' farm and showed people pictures of his sword collection. He also wore heavy belt buckles and joked about using them as a weapon. When there was a school shooting recently, he was like, "Oh, cool." Didn't talk to him after that. So a lot of people are replying to me why I didn't report him. The school already knows about his issues and he's been referred for anger issues to the counsellor for lashing out. He doesn't believe he's a threat though. I believe that he had some mental issues since he didn't understand how creepy his behaviour. Story 13. Everybody has met her. That loud, apprehensive person with a cracking voice, possibly due to being in a constant state of self-inflicted crisis. She says more inappropriate things than appropriate things, and her personal life somehow always finds itself leaking into her professional environment. The type of person who will leave mid-meeting with a client to go to Starbucks. Her. Anyway, like 2 months after hiring her, she informs us she needs to see a person in Miami. We live in LA. Due to some undisclosed arm pain issues. She didn't give us a time frame of return, but said it may be months to recover. During this conversation, we found that this was not a doctor, or at least not a licensed medical practitioner, but somebody that her friend recommended, in Miami, for months. Also, she threatened to sue over insurance company because it didn't cover whatever she was doing and she just assumed it would. We never saw her again, but she seems to keep bouncing back on her feet in pretty solid positions based on LinkedIn. Story 14. Work at the IT help desk at a small community college. People pretty frequently come by for directions to other parts of the college, so when this guy was asking for where they train the police, it seemed normal enough. We have a police academy as part of the college, so I started giving him directions there, but he kind of just started talking over me and telling me he trained all the police here, and he used to be an instructor, but they moved. I was trying to give him directions, but he started telling me I needed to look him up on my computer. Around this time, my former Marine co-worker kind of heard what was going on and came in to assist. The strange guy asked my co-worker if he was in the military. He was wearing a USMC shirt, and then proceeded to tell him how he was an Army-Navy Ranger, and he trained all my co-workers as superiors. At this point, we realised he was totally bat crazy, and I told the strange guy I was going to grab another co-worker who knew the area better to get him better directions and hit the campus security silent alarm button in the next office over. Security came. He acted like he recognised the officer and asked him what took him so long and said he came here to see him. The officer didn't know. Strange guy was just out of it. All security was really allowed to do was escort him off campus and hope he didn't come back. So I'd be lying if I said I wasn't pretty terrified walking to my car when I left that day. Oh, I mean, okay, that is kind of strange. That would be terrifying, wouldn't it? Like the fact that if all they can sort of do is escort them off of the premises, and if it's you dealing with it, that person knows that you've got them kicked out the premises, that's what I would be terrified of. Because I'm like, oh no, they know what I look like, they're not liking me, and they're Captain Crazy already, so they're going to be on the hunt for me. And if they know I'm working today, they're probably just going to come back a couple hours later if they've been escorted off the premises, That would be terrifying. I hate having strange encounters with strangers. That was a lot of the word strange. But yeah, I just hate it. It's really scary. So I can fully relate with you here. Story 15. My first job was at Target. I was in the Food Avenue section, which is where you would buy popcorn, nachos, or soft pretzels. Most have been converted to Starbucks by now. Anyways, there was this lady Kay who would come in quite often. She had a little cart with 2 wheels that she pulled behind her, full of stuff. She would wear baggy dresses and hacked the hair up front in jagged pieces to the scalp like a mangy Benjamin Franklin. Kay would wander around for a while and then come to Food Ave and buy a sandwich. Whenever we exchanged money, she would ask me if she swallowed or was choking on any change. I would calmly look at her and say, "No, Kay, you're just fine," sometimes repeating myself 4 or 5 times. One day, she looked at me and said, "Thank you for being so kind and not treating me like I'm crazy. Everyone else does. When I was a little girl, I saw my grandmother choke to death. Can you fricking imagine? This was 15 years ago. I hope Kay's found peace and contentment wherever she is." Okay, I mean, I can't lie, gang. This is true. Like, a lot of what happens in our childhood or, just in the process of us growing up and becoming adults, that affects us mentally seconds to none. Like, we literally have no idea how much that affects us and the people we are. And like the way we react to things and the way we say things, the way we do things. So that can also be a lot of why these problems arise, which is you're not necessarily crazy, but you've just been affected by something, by past trauma in your life that makes you kind of different to everyone else, which isn't, I don't believe in that. Nobody's different because normal isn't a thing, everyone is a completely different person. So how can we all be normal? It's just impossible. But yeah, I think that's why some of these misinterpretations, let's say, can arise because past trauma can bring out things that may be threatening or unrecognizable or, yeah, scary to another person who hasn't experienced that and can't relate, you know? Am I rambling on or am I making sense? Someone please let me know. Cheese, I hope it's you, brother. Story 16. Co-worker. At first she seemed okay. She would tell me stories about her life where literally everyone in her life has done her wrong. I realised just how delusional she was when she was telling me about an interaction with a third co-worker that I was present for. She skewed the details of that interaction so bad. Meanwhile, I'm listening and questioning everything this woman has ever told me. Story 17. This is a strange one. I was stood outside of Greg's, a bakery, deciding what to have with my girlfriend stood slightly away from me. I'm guessing the scruffy man that came over thought she was alone as he walked straight to her, grabbed her arm and said he was going to abuse her. Now I was already moving as I'd noticed him going towards her. She'd frozen, and I threw him off her and said the only thing I could think of, which was that I was going to abuse and murder him first. Then he started screaming that I was going to abuse him and he needed help and was struggling to get away from me. My girlfriend grabs me and pulls me away as the man starts crying and his screams become hysterical. She said there's something not right with him and not to hurt him. So I stood in front of her until several security guards came over as we fairly calmly explained what had happened. He continued to scream about how I'd attacked him. I eventually just walked off and bought 2 steak bakes from Greg's. The whole situation was very confusing and I don't think I handled it particularly well, but what are you meant to do when an insane man threatens to abuse your girlfriend and then forgets that he did? She was fine, so all's well that ends well, I guess. Greg's, not Greg's. Clearly I need to pay more attention. Yes, yes, yes. If there's any English listeners listening, well, any English listeners, should I say, big up the Greg's, isn't it? Literally, Greg's is the best thing going. Their pizzas are to die for. And their sausage rolls? I've never tasted a sausage so good in my life. It is truly a place of dreams. Do they have Greg's in America? I'd love to. Or is Greg's American? I actually don't know. I should probably know these things before I mention it, but guys, if it's English and it's not in America, no, it's got to be English. Greg is a very English name, isn't it? Like, Greg. It just alarms me as being English. But guys, if you are from America and you're listening, if you ever get the chance to come over to England, please go to Greg's, okay? Get the pepperoni pizza. Also get it's not coronation chicken. I'll have to think on that and let you know, but it's some kind of chicken baguette. Oh, it's so good. Yeah, moving on. Story 18. There's a guy in my town who's pretty much known as a local crazy person. I'm pretty sure he suffers from a mental illness, but he's functional in conversation. It's just that they'll steer into weird territories like terrorist conspiracies or concerns about people being out to abuse him really quick. First time I encountered him, he'd accidentally smashed the beer bottle he was drinking against a wall and cut his hand pretty bad in the process. We met pretty close to the local doctor's office, so I just guided him there to get it stitched up. Guys, if any of you come from like a small town, you've always got that one crazy person, haven't you? Like you always do. In a city, it's slightly more rare just because there's so many people. It would be hard to just have the one in your area. But yeah, if you come from a small town, there was always that one person that everyone knew who was like the local nutter, wasn't there? Story 19. It took me an absurdly long time to find out my good friend was a pathological liar. I just didn't have any good reason not to believe him, and my other friends didn't catch on either. He wasn't malicious or anything. He just wanted people to think he knew interesting people. At some point, the good faith of friendship broke down in the face of the collective weight of his fake stories, and I just stopped talking to him. It did cost me some friends once when I repeated something he'd said around a new group of people, and that they thought I was the one making rubbish up. What a mess that was. Story 20. Worked at a retail store while in college. Hottest guy I've ever seen came in and was, of course, taking his little sister shopping. Marry me? I struck up a conversation with him, and after about 10 minutes, he neighed like a horse very loudly. I was like, what the frick? But just didn't say anything. Happened again a few minutes later, and I felt terrible for him thinking he had Tourette's. No, he was just crazy. Started talking about how he can communicate with horses and how I was in the process of becoming one. I just said I had to get back to work. Kept neighing the whole time he was in the store and all the way through checking out. To this day, I like to tell myself he was just fricking with me, and somewhere out there, he's telling his buddies about the time he made this random chick think he could communicate with horses. Story 21. She started to talk about her amputee corn fetish. I was lucky because the bartender called my name for my free birthday shot. She was trying to show me videos but was too drunk to work her phone. Honestly, I was just about to walk away from her. Amputee corn fetish. What even is amputee corn? I'd rather not know what this is, I think. So let's not get any links or any descriptions, please, Cheese. But yeah, we'll just save that one in the memory. Amputee corn. Story 22. I got into a taxi in my very average and unexciting English town, and the driver spotted my suitcase. Oh, you've been travelling? Where? Just went up to see family back up in Scotland. Bet you don't get many of those dark ones up there. Sorry? You know, the ones with darker skin? I went completely quiet at this point and just let him talk. He went through 7 different conspiracy theories, many racial comments and homophobic comments. This was a 10-minute drive from the train station to the street next to mine. The one thing I responded to was, "What have you got planned for tonight?" My boyfriend and I are going to that new Caribbean place in town. I love foreign food. It's just better in every way to British food. It's just so boring and Story 23. Just today, one of my classmates, who was probably high on something, looks at me, pokes his leg and says, "I think it's infected." I wasn't that concerned until he pulled out a knife and cut down the side of his leg like an inch across. He then has the nerve to look at me and say, "Ow." Needless to say, I let my teacher know and went home early. Story 24. A member of the gym that I work at struck up a conversation with me by giving me a compliment. He said he was impressed at how attentive I was while training one of my clients. I had a completely normal conversation with him for another 15 or so minutes, thinking he might potentially become a new client. Then all of a sudden, he starts talking about how he's an insanely wealthy music video producer, how Obama likes to molest little boys, and how he would like to conjugate with me sometime. That's a hard pass, creep. As I'm trying to back away and politely exit the conversation, he starts telling me about the martial arts he's been doing and tries to show me how to put someone in a chokehold. On me. Yeah, he's banned from the gym now. Story 25. During our small talk, since I was seated next to him at a dinner party, everything seemed cool. Then the topic of marriage comes up, and he's flabbergasted I let my wife go to work, drive a car, and not be in my presence. He explains that God created women to please and serve their men, and to be in the kitchen at all times, and to basically be a slave to their men. Literally went on for about 15 minutes, and I seriously thought he was just a idiot making a joke, but he was dead serious. I excused myself and went to the restroom, and thankfully someone took my spot at the table, so I had to move to a different spot. Oh, sweet Lord. Sweet Jesus. Let's me think. Is this guy Andrew Tate? Because he very much sounds like him. What's actually happened to that moron? He's kind of like disappeared off the face of the earth, hasn't he? Like at one point he was absolutely popping and like just everywhere I looked on social media. And now he's just kind of disappeared. Not that anyone really cares, but where actually is he? Anyone know? And I'm not even going to ask for opinions on Andrew Tate because I'm sure we all think the same thing. Douche. Story 26. I work in customer service. This dude said he identified as a cat more than a human. He also claimed the police were trying to kill his cats. Eventually, the conversation became about how he was going to starve to death because he didn't know how to cook. He also said he couldn't dine out anymore because there were no places to get real food, hamburgers, in his neighborhood because of all of the gentrification going on since the blacks and Puerto Ricans moved in to his neighborhood. Story 27. My very sweet, elderly next-door neighbor explained to me how God gave her my house. She casually told me, "Oh, you should have seen how beautiful it was the day we moved in. I touched your door and I knew then and there that God wanted me to own your house. You may live in it now, but it's only temporary." It gave me the creeps, but I didn't say anything because her husband mows my lawn for free. Story 28. Have to converse with mentally ill people all the time as a nurse. Part of my job description. A big part is being kind, but firm. Acknowledging that they feel that way, but reminding them that their perception, while it feels valid, is not true. But that's coming from a therapeutic relationship. I try to avoid crazy people when I'm not at work. Story 29. Started volunteering at a women's shelter. First night at the check-in desk for the clients. Talking with a very well put together lady who travelled all over the world. We spoke of very specific sightseeing we'd both been to Egypt. She's obviously highly educated, wearing fine clothing, so I finally ask how she came to be at a homeless shelter, and she says, "I left my CFO position at a huge company in Seattle to take care of my dad who had Alzheimer's. His care cost a lot. I got depressed after he passed away, and here I am, but don't worry, I have a daycare up the hill with 25 children who watch TV all day in a storage shed. All I have to do is feed them one meal and one snack." My jaw hit the floor. Yeah, she had paranoid schizophrenia, and she was delusional. The other volunteers were trying to hide their laughter from my reaction. Talk about a 180. Literally. Talk about a 180. Jeez. See, it's mad, actually, because she sort of came out with that thinking it was normal and that it was okay. Do you know what I mean? Like, the fact that she just embedded that into the conversation as if it's like a normal thing. Like, yeah, I've got a daycare up the road, basically starving kids to death, but, normal's me, normal's who I am. But yeah, it's just, it's funny how that can seem normal to someone, you know? It's not funny at all because obviously it's mental health issues, but yeah, it's just, it's almost hard to believe, isn't it? that, someone's brain could comprehend something like that being normal. Story 30. My old boss. He believed that all the traffic lights went red on purpose so the police had time to search his house. He had many more issues, but that was for sure crazy. I stayed working with him after a friend of him told me that many years before, he found his mum dead in her closet, locked up. Thieves went inside her house and locked her up in a closet and left, not knowing she had no visitors ever. So one day, he goes there and opens her clothes. She was dead for months. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more videos coming daily.